Okay, tonight we're going to look at 1.2, Modern World History Standard, explain the impact of the Crusades on the Renaissance, on European exploration, including the significance of humanism and the revival of learning and transfer of knowledge and sailing ancient philosophy there from the Arabs to the Europeans. We're going to do humanism in another slide. I first want us to look at the picture here from the textbook of the four different crusades. You see the key here that could help you. This is Christian territory. We've looked at the Holy Roman Empire, and you can see right here the Islamic territory of Asia Minor, of course, that started in here, the Arabian Peninsula, Asia Minor, and then all the way through North Africa into the Iberian Peninsula, which we'll also deal with in just a little bit. The main thing that I want you to understand here is in the impact, in the question here, the essential knowledge question, what impact did the Crusades have on the interaction between Western and Eastern worlds? And it was economic. Trade was established from the Crusades. We know that the goal from the Catholic Church militarily was to conquer the Holy Land back. They were able to do that, then they lost it. Back and forth, but I think the long-term goal here, the long-term effect was the trade routes and what was and the effect it would have on Europe. You know, I'm pointing right here to this city of Italian city-state of Venice, and it's Italian city-states of Venice that would definitely benefit from the Crusades economically. Goods like sugar, cotton, rice, spices, fruits, cloth were all traded up in here in Venice. Money would make its way along with products produced in Europe. Artisans producing works of art would make their way to the east, and money would also make its way. So money was exchanging both ways, and wealth was growing at this time. One thing to understand too is with the death of feudalism, the serfs now were able to move away from that status of being on the bottom of the triangle that we were looking at with feudalism, and the commercial revolution was coming. Different economic institutions would be established in places like Venice, and for example, merchants would have to use bookkeepers, money exchangers, managers, and the banking system would change. So all these kind of jobs would lead from the serfs to a middle-class lifestyle, and would definitely lead to a rebirth in Europe from not just from the top down, but from the bottom up, and it would be very important. So these trade routes, as you see right here, will continue through to Asia and to the Americas. I have a picture here of Marco Polo's routes in 1260 to 1295, and you can see the coming out of Venice, Italy, the Mediterranean Sea, some of the land routes, and going all the way to China. So the advantages of intellectual knowledge and of economic advantages spurred on explorers like Marco Polo, and would lead to more exploration, European exploration to the Americas, and continuing on to the east. Also remember to use your textbook. This is chapter 14, section 1. You want to look in your textbook and take notes on, at the end of the section has effects of the Crusades, and take notes on those points and looking at the essential questions that we have here. What impact did the Crusades have on the interaction between the Western and Eastern worlds? Okay, we're going to continue with the modern world history and look at 1.2 standard, looking at the significance of humanism. This is going to be very important in the changing of the mindset from feudalism to the Renaissance. It's first important to understand the definition. We're looking at chapter 17, section 1, and you can look here along with the essential knowledge question, which is, of course, the impact of the Crusades on the interaction between Western and Eastern worlds. And definitely one of the changes here is a move towards humanism, or as we'll look at, secularism. Now, humanism is kind of defined as an intellectual movement that focuses on human potential and achievements, instead of trying to make a classical text agree with Christian teachings from the medieval church and the teachings of the Catholic Church. A couple of things: revival of learning. If we're going to talk about exploration, of course, the changes in ship building and the navigation techniques that were used would be very important to the routes that were used to expand in trade. So, and through that became wealth, and from wealth, people would become what would be known as patrons, and they would be spending their money in the arts, and that would promote humanism and the human potential for art, literature, poetry, music. I have right here, of course, a picture of Leonardo da Vinci did. So we're looking at, not only is it, of course, work of art, but we're looking at the human body, which during the feudalism with the church definitely would not have been celebrated. But as you can see, this picture here is an important part of Renaissance art. And then finally, the Gutenberg press, 1452, Gutenberg press came into being, and then in 1475, I believe the English language was printed on it, and you see the books there. So definitely without the printing press, that the classical texts that were that the Muslims had transcribed from Arabic would not have continued on, and Europe would not be filled with this knowledge-based literature without the printing press. Modern World History 2.3 standard says, explain the competition between European kingdoms in space and resources. We've done the 100 Years' War between France and England and the rise of the Holy Roman Empire. This is really concentrating on the response to Islam in the Iberian Peninsula. So that's what we want to look at here. Of course, we see the peninsula here, body of land with water on three sides. Okay, and as we've looked at maps before, we've seen how Islam had spread from the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula, all the way in Asia Minor through North Africa, across North Africa, and then really controlling Spain. But at this time, we want to look at how the Islamic faith dated back to about 711 A.D. Much of the country had been conquered by the Muslims. But in 1492, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella's armies were able to remove the Muslims during the Reconquista. The Reconquista was almost an 800-year period in which the northern Catholic kingdoms, okay, right here, we're talking Portugal, Leon, Castile, Aragon, okay, Navarre, would come down into these Muslim lands, Muslim areas in here. And these areas, this map doesn't really show up, but these areas about right in here were Muslim territories. So northern Catholics would come down and were fighting. You see the picture here, and you see the Christian, you can see right there the Christ and the Christian fighting, and then the Muslims here. So painting from the time period. But these Catholics, Northern Catholics, were able to defeat and remove the Muslims from this territory and regain this for Europe. So this became a very important part of reestablishing Christianity in this part of Europe. And of course, as we know, this is going to lead in Spain to become very wealthy in the time to come, the exploration time to come in the Americas. But first, they had to regain their country from the Muslims. Okay, we're looking at Modern World History 1.1 standard. Describe the diffusion of people and goods between Europe, Asia, and Africa during the 14th and 15th centuries to show the network networks of economic interdependence and cultural interaction. I want to make a quick point about the fact that the Catholic Church, after the Crusades, with humanism coming in and then the rebirth of the Renaissance in Europe, lost a lot of its power. And of course with the plague, bubonic plague, lost a lot of its power and influence during this time period. So I want to make that clear before we talk about the expansion and people and goods moving from place to place. One thing that's important to understand is, and you see the arrow here, and you see Italy, how Italy was able to come back and control the Mediterranean. The Muslims didn't have a big hold on the Mediterranean as far as ships were concerned. The Byzantines did, but they were overtaken by the Muslims. So once Italy was able to take over the waterways here in the Mediterranean, and as you see these trade routes coming through India to the east, back to Europe, and around Africa, it became very important. It would lead to commercial revolution and to a total change in the social dynamics of Europe. It's going to lead to economic interdependence and cultural interaction between these different groups. It's going to cause massive political and social change, which we can view as the Renaissance. Keep in mind that a banking system is going to be developed because of this, and changes are going to be made as far as people. The serfs of feudalism are going to be able to move away from their class and move to a different class that would be economically more beneficial as this trade continues. And especially we talked about in Venice and Italy, you're going to end up having things with these traders. You're going to have merchants, you're going to have artisans, okay? You're going to be trading their artwork and doing artwork to be traded around the world. And then from there, other jobs are going to be created. Bookkeepers, money exchangers, managers. And then finally, the banking system is going to be developed, and we'll look at it in another standard. But you see the trade routes here and what and its effect on not only on Europe but on the entire world, as though this time Europe reaches out to catch up with the Muslim world in a sense and move out of the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. And so wealth was traveling back and forth between East and West, and people were being connected, and goods.